Hello, everyone, and welcome back to First and 15 Fantasy Football Podcast Injury Rounds. I'm your host, Dr. Carlos Reyes, and what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into one of the critical aspects of building a winning fantasy football team. That is drafting strategies with injury considerations, injury risk, and previous injuries themselves. So, let's kind of get into these key factors. So this is going to be part one of our series that we're going to be putting out to give you some tips, some strategies as you're looking for these upcoming drafts that will be happening, maybe happening for you now, and some of your best balls, redraft, dynasties, and so on and so forth. Trying to give you some key factors as you look into, building this winning fantasy football team specifically. We know that injuries are a big part of the NFL. That is certain. It is a game and war of attrition. These bodies take big hits. They wear down over time. It's how well they can manage some of these injuries throughout the season. Things that are suffering are soft tissue injuries, strains, sprains, major surgeries that happened in the previous, season. Those are all things and major factors to consider as you move forward to building, your fantasy football team and drafting these players, specifically mitigating some of your risks. But again, if you are to account for some of these injury risks, you can mitigate some of these setbacks and these ups and downs during the season so that you can be prepared for any type of situation that is to arise during the season itself. But first part that we're going to get into that we're going to share with you is going to be looking at specifically researching your injury history. You want to know a player's past injury history so that it can give you insight to specifically their risk moving forward, and then making real calculated decisions and risk based on some of the injury history. Now, injury history is not the only thing you're going to think about specifically while drafting. Obviously, there's other things such as like team chemistry, potential talent, what is the overall team situation, who's the quarterback, what's the offensive scheme, who's the offensive coordinator, what's the head coach like, right? There's so many things that are happening specifically around them, but just looking at injury risk itself can add another layer to that, and then allow you to make a more calculated decision based on that too. So let's dive into researching your injury history. First thing is like using reliable sources. I utilize things like X. I'll look at team websites. Sometimes I'll use Fantasy Pros, Draft Sharks, just typing it into Google, what is those injuries, and look at these injury histories so you can get a more comprehensive, detailed list of these injuries specifically that have maybe suffered recurrently season after season for some of these players, or you're looking at something that, they suffered a major injury last season and they're dealing with the rehabilitation over the off season, and what is their outlook coming forward into the following season. All that must be made taken into mind. The other thing is to obviously pay attention to patterns. You want to look at and be wary of players with recurring patterns of soft tissue injuries, especially things like hamstring strains, calf strains, quad strains. Those are big, time injuries that have high incidence of recurring and re-aggravating during the season itself, or at least becoming something of a pattern. Someone I can think of it like that is like Keenan Allen and Christian Watson, right? They're constantly dealing with some of these soft tissue injuries. Keenan Allen dealing with more injury, a laundry list of injury history. He's not getting any younger, and he's going to be dealing with some of these things as his body breaks down. Christian Watson dealing with for the past 2 years, seeking this professional help to, balance out his quad size and his leg size and bring symmetry and balance to his legs, strength and size to help mitigate some of these soft tissue injuries. Those are things that I'm looking at specifically, right? I can then determine whether they have like an injury risk. What is it, low? Is it medium? Is it high versus injury prone? Those are things I'm looking at. And then major surgeries like ACL reconstruction and repair, MCL reconstruction and repair, high ankle sprain reconstruction. Sometimes that's like a tightrope procedure. What does that look like specifically for these individuals? If you're looking like ACL, two of the players that come into mind last year was like TJ Hawkinson and Nick Chubb. TJ Hawkinson, late season injury, dealing with an ACL, MCL tear, 9 to 12 months later is when you can expect for him to be actually ready to return to play, and take another 6 months for him to actually feel like he can get his body right back underneath him, and up to 2 years to feel like he's back to full strength without any setback or recurrent injury itself. And so Nick Chubb, same thing, ACL, MCL injury, early in the season, but he's come out to say how, mentally tough it's been to come back from an injury like that, specifically because of how he's suffered something like that in the same knee and back in college, right? So those are the things that I'm looking at specifically, and it leads into my last point, so you guys can think about specifically during your draft, is what is the recovery timeline, and considering those things as you're drafting your players. Someone that I can think of last year was like Breece Hall. You considered their ACL reconstruction and that timeline, but over the course of the season he didn't have any setbacks. They ramped him up slowly. They started to unleash some of the reps, and by the end of the season he was primarily a fantasy football league winner. And I saw it happening, right? Because they're going to get stronger, they're going to get their feet underneath them, they're going to get healthier, and they're going to make more competent plays as they're going forward, because they're not suffering any setbacks themselves. So those are things to consider. ACL tears, 9 to 12 months. Adrian Peterson was the outlier, 9 months. Everyone else has kind of followed suit within the 9-12 months. So you can definitely think about those things. Things like Achilles tears, they can take anywhere between 4 to 6 months. So somebody like Aaron Rodgers, who suffered it at the very beginning of the season, has plenty of time to come back and recover, considering where he was injured in the season, and then how much time it's going to take for him to actually return for the following season. So something like that is definitely not, coming into play for me, thinking about the injury risk, and it's pretty low. But I would say low to medium because of his age. He's had recurring calf strains back in the past too, and so maybe take it up to injury risk medium for me. So that's why you see kind of Aaron Rodgers falling in some of the draft boards. But those are the things you looking at using reliable sources as you research their injury history, paying attention to patterns, and then obviously looking at considering the recovery timelines. But hopefully that's enough insight for you two. That's part 1. We're going to be looking at part 2 and part 3 coming up, to give you some more draft strategies, specifically considering injury risk and injury histories themselves. But thanks for tuning in to First and 15 Fantasy Football Podcast Injury Rounds. Make sure that you subscribe, hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And as always, make sure that you leave comments, questions, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. But happy drafting, and may your team stay healthy all season long.